What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the 5280 podcast right here on the MHRT network. I'm your host, Douglas Creevy, alongside my co-hosts, as always, Cameron Parker Pooh, Gage Madrid, and Glenn Hauser. How's it going, fellas?
What up?
Yo.
What's going on?
What? Nothing. All right. So obviously the biggest news coming out of the last couple days, Drew Sanders tore his Achilles and had surgery, and nobody knew about it.
Yeah, not exactly the way that the Broncos drew it up. As far as this is everything that is bad news for the Broncos with the linebacker room, and it was Sanders. It was expected to be a huge year for for him and possibly him maybe even moving to the to inside linebacker. Although, if you kind of go a little bit deeper, maybe there's an explanation for why they drafted Jonah Ellis now. But yeah, it's a huge blow to their linebacker room, and if they were wanting to play him at inside linebacker, that just could result in maybe guys like Lavelle Bailey and Alex Mock to get some playing time and possibly their window of making the roster. Who knows necessarily, in terms of expecting guys like Sternad and Jonas Griffith and coming, off of injury for Griffith and for Sternad with special teams. But it's a huge blow. We certainly seem like the Broncos and George Payton in the previous months are really wanting to see him develop. And this is not the best news in the world, for the Broncos.
And I think that the moves that were made by the team kind of indicates what position they wanted to play him at because of, like you said, they drafted Jonah Ellis. That feels like they wanted to play him at edge. If they had made a move at off-ball linebacker, aside from Cody Barton, they brought in Cody Barton before Drew Sanders went down, obviously. So it feels like they were going to move him onto the edge. Otherwise, they would have made a move to bring in somebody off-ball linebacker, I feel like. But just a devastating injury for Drew Sanders. He didn't really have a set role on this Denver Broncos defense coming into this year. It was going to be very much a make or break role for him. He struggled on the edge last year. He struggled even more at off-ball linebacker. I feel like Drew Sanders at this point, if he gets onto the field next year in the latter half of the year, because it was announced that with the timeline of his injury, he could be ready to go for the back half of next year. But even if he gets on the field, it's going to be tough for him to make an impact coming off of a torn Achilles, being behind the 8 ball in terms of all of that development lost in training camp, OTAs, all this stuff. It's just a devastating blow for a young player.
He's been an interesting story for a couple different reasons this offseason. Number one being the fact that none of us really believed that he was not going to be playing inside linebacker with Josie Jewell leaving and that position kind of opening up, despite, Griffith coming back and Barton being signed. The hunch that it seemed like most of Broncos country had was that he was going to be the inside linebacker. So he was kind of an interesting topic of conversation there. But then when you hear about the injury yesterday, and upon reading Mike Kliss's story, who broke the story, and realizing that it happened prior to the draft, so this has been over a month, he not only tore his Achilles, he had the surgery, and literally nobody publicly knew about it. I mean, that is an incredible amount of secrecy that Sean Payton has instituted within those 4 walls. So, I mean, Drew, with what position will he actually play? And then holy crap, he got injured 4 or 5 weeks ago and nobody knew about it. I mean, interesting topic of conversation.
Yeah, and it really makes what this whole Jonah Ellis selection quite fascinating, especially because if Ellis was a player that, certainly seemed like, he at least he had some linebacker to him, right? And so there was at least some speculation of him playing linebacker. And now you hear the possible news with Drew and the injury. It really does now, once we all officially have heard the news and stuff with the injury pre-draft and everything, it seems like Jonah Ellis was not only an impactful draft pick, but also that is at least replace Sanders in 2024, right? At least one that's going to replace him in 2024. So it's certainly going to be exciting to watch that kind of development. And if Ellis plays and he plays at a very high level, the Drew Sanders hate train, if you will, is going to be even louder after 2024.
Yeah, and do we know what happened or how he heard it, or we still don't know anything on that?
Don't know anything. We don't know if it was in practice. He's training on his own. No clue.
Like literally no idea even where the surgery was. The state it occurred in, like nothing. It's interesting. So what is your guys' take on, had he not gotten injured and the third round pick, the second pick in the draft for the Broncos, shows up or rolls up on the board, do you think they would have targeted edge, or do you think another position would have been in play at that moment?
It's anybody's guess. I feel like, but I wonder if because it was in the third round, right? So maybe they take Troy Franklin there, right? And I mean, because there was a lot of speculation of him even being in the first round, and they take Troy Franklin in the fourth. Maybe they had another wide receiver in mind, possibly within the third, or do they take a tight end in the third? Right? I think maybe if there's probably any position maybe to look at, maybe they go tight end. Maybe they go tight end in the third. Get up. And so
Get out!
that is certainly I think a direction that it can go is it can go a lot of different directions. I probably would personally feel like maybe it would go to tight end, but also they didn't take tight end at all in the draft, so it probably could have gone completely a different direction.
Sound like
you think about it, maybe. I mean, he was just being a complete asshole.
It's like Lawrence Taylor, pack of crazed dogs.
Yeah, literally. Maybe their guy at tight end would have been on the board at that point. Maybe it's a Ben Sinnott. That's somebody I think of right off the bat. He went a little bit earlier than I expected him to, and maybe Denver would have tried to go in that direction had they not had that immediate need at edge rusher. But I still feel like they were going to throw a dart at the board at some point for the edge rush room. I just don't necessarily know if it would have been forced so early had Drew Sanders not gotten injured.
Well, I guess one of the big questions we have is, did we think that Drew Sanders was going to be that guy on the edge? Like we've had great edge rushers, but not for a while. Like you knew when Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware were on the field, they were your guys, right? Same thing with Elvis Dumervil. When Bradley Chubb at least started, we thought it was him. But we have all these guys on the edge, and are any of them actually a number one edge rusher? Is Drew Sanders that guy? Jonah Ellis that guy?
No.
Nope.
And I think that's what, if there's any correlation, with the offense and defense, that's what makes the wide receiver room so fun. It's what makes the edge room so fun, because they're quite identical, actually. Because there's a lot of good bodies in the room. There's not a Batman. There's not a Batman in that room, and that is where it all falls in line. And now I think because of some players in the room, they could take that next step and become a Batman, and that's where you probably would maybe look at maybe some of the talent level in the room, and maybe some players could rise above it. But with that, it creates a lot of possibilities and scenarios for people like that, right? We said Jonathan Cooper is probably your Tim Patrick of the room. He is your Mr. Consistent. And then you have Baron Browning, who is maybe your most talented, right? I mean, we've said it before, even on the show before, there are plays where he gets to the quarterback where you see shades of Von Miller, like literally shades of Von Miller with Browning getting to the quarterback the way he dips and bends, and even does should I say a Von Miller-esque spin to the quarterback, or even a nice little cut, right, cut to the middle of the offensive line when he sees a hole, and exactly the way that Von Miller would. And then you go to Nick Bonito, where he's just a pure speed rusher, right? And so and we know that especially with a speed rusher, that's one of the easiest type of traits to get to a quarterback rather regularly. So I feel like if you're going to maybe look at some players that could become that Batman in the room, I would probably tend to go maybe toward like the Baron Brownings of the room, and maybe even the Nick Bonitos. But I don't want to count out a guy like Jonathan Cooper because of the fact he's so consistent that if he gets home and he's winning at a consistent clip regularly, then I wouldn't even rule that out either.
And you wonder how this injury is really going to impact some of the future decisions as well, because Browning and Cooper are both entering their final years of their rookie deals, and each of them should be commanding quite a bit of a raise, especially Cooper, since he was a 7th-round pick. And I don't know his salary off the top of my head, but it can't be anything that's going to be remotely close to what he should be making next year if he continues to perform like he has in these recent seasons. So who knows? I mean, this could have been one of those where you move him to edge. I'm talking about Sanders, and you let him do his thing, and then all of a sudden you're like, all right, now I can pick 1 or 0 of those impending free agents, and then move forward with some of the other signings that we have, like a Surtain and a Miners that are going to command some serious dollars.
It's felt like Baron Browning and Jonathan Cooper have been playing for one contract. It feels like this coming year, both of those guys are going to be playing for one contract. And if I had to hedge my bets right now, Baron Browning would probably be the guy who ends up getting it. But again, I don't want to rule out a guy like Jonathan Cooper just because of his resilience, his talent level, what he's shown these past couple of years. I would not count out Jonathan Cooper whatsoever.
Yeah, and also I wouldn't even rule out at least the idea of them keeping both. I mean, like, because I think that there's so much that it goes into contracts and anything else that with even the consistency, the way that the Broncos have even done things, especially on the defensive side of the ball, I wouldn't even rule out the likelihood of them bringing both of them back. And but I think given the fact that no one has really taken that and really ran with it as far as being a Batman, that's where I do think a guy like Jonah Ellis is really fascinating, because, and I mentioned it on our episodes before, but it's like Ellis, there was a stretch of games, right? Like there was a stretch of games, particularly in 2023, where he just went nuts. I mean, like he from the UCLA game in week 4 to week 8, he went bonkers. So he had 3 sacks against UCLA, 2 sacks against Oregon State, 2 against Cal, and 2 against USC. That is 9 sacks in a total of like 5 games there, and that is for some players, that is, at least in the NFL, that is an actual regular season stat line for players, right? And the goal is to necessarily be right at the above 10 threshold to at least be considered maybe a pass rush 1, right? Or maybe even the Batman for a pass rush room. And so if he does that kind of thing regularly, where he's getting 10 to 12, even 13 sacks, that's at least a window of opportunity for you where you can possibly be the Batman of the guy. And if he does, and if he does it to where he really, gets in that mode where he's really taking over games, it'll really help out that room.
So I kind of want to go from the defensive side to the offensive side of the ball, because I think that's where 2 of the biggest question marks are. Now, we had OTA starting today, but there wasn't any media, so nobody knows what the heck happened, which sucks. But we have 2 big areas that I think have the biggest question mark. One is quarterback, because we all believe it's going to be Bo Nix, right?
We believe, yes.
We believe, but we don't believe that Bo Nix is going to start at the top of OTAs. It sounds like it's going to be Stidham, Wilson, Bo, right? And then he has his opportunities to move through OTAs, training camp, and move up. But then that also leaves the question of wide receiver, right? Like, what does Troy Franklin look like if Bo Nix isn't throwing him the ball? What role does Cortland Sutton have if Bo Nix is throwing him the ball? There's so many questions as to what it might look like. I kind of want to just get your guys' thoughts on how you think it's going to shake out and how the receiver room is going to look depending on the quarterback.
It's a hard one, but I will say at least let's start first with the wide receiver position. I will say this: Cortland Sutton not being there is actually a good thing for the young wide receivers, that are there in the room, because that will allow a guy like Bo Nix to really establish the relationship with guys like, or reestablish with guys like Troy Franklin. But Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, possibly even little Jordan Humphrey, right? Humphrey and even Jalen Virgil and
Brandon Johnson.
A lot of these young players, and especially bubble wide receivers, guys like Virgil and Brandon Johnson, that's really beneficial, for for at least a wide receiver room, because especially if you're Sean Payton and you're looking at evaluating a roster, say they do start out with Bo Nix as number 3 on the depth chart, right? That's beneficial because, like, say he has the most chemistry with guys like Jalen Virgil and Brandon Johnson. Well, that can also carry with you into preseason. And so if you're evaluating a roster and you see the future, right? And that's what our hope is that Bo Nix is the future and he is the franchise. You should be evaluating it in the sense of the chemistry, the overall chemistry with the room. And if he actually has really good chemistry with guys like Jalen Virgil and Brandon Johnson, that actually could give maybe that a little bit of an edge over some of those other guys because of that chemistry. I'm not necessarily saying that Brandon Johnson and Virgil might make the roster. I still foresee him probably on the practice squad, but I wouldn't rule that out either because of the whole player development thing. So, but I think that it's also really important that Cortland Sutton still be in that building, because if Cortland Sutton is there, you're talking at least about the possibility of a wide receiver 1, being there. And also, it cannot be even remiss about having Tim Patrick, and having Tim Patrick stay healthy this season is maybe priority 1, for that Broncos wide receiver room. If he can stay healthy, then you're talking about a wide receiver room that can just raise its ceiling just a bit more. I mean, so much was made about, even the time with Russell Wilson here, unfortunately. But we know that last offseason, unfortunately, when Patrick went down, he was his number 1 target. He was his favorite target, meaning Tim Patrick. So you bring him into the room, you bring the big-bodied wide receivers in of Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick. Everything is just beneficial for you when you have all the pieces together in one party, if you will.
You mentioned Brandon Johnson. I have a feeling if he got put on the practice squad, somebody would definitely swoop in and pick him up, I would think.
Wouldn't be surprised.
In Mike Kliss's preview of OTAs a couple days ago, he had several questions that were being asked, and he referenced in there that Cortland Sutton, with 2 years left on his deal, does want a new contract. And he said, but that's not going to happen with the Surtain and Miners deals impending. So we're going to be at a stalemate here, a standstill. I'm certainly not for sure that Cortland Sutton is going to be on this roster come game 1 against Seattle. And I'd be fine with it, quite honestly. Like, we've gone over this ad nauseum. I certainly have made my points why I think it's time to move on. But maybe Tim Patrick from a locker room standpoint can be our wide receiver 1, not necessarily from a field standpoint, but I think there's a lot of talent in that wide receiver room even without Court being in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I think even with Court being in there at this point, Tim Patrick's probably going to be your veteran receiver, your veteran leader, because he's A, the longest tenured receiver in that building, and B, let's just be honest, he's the receiver in that building that's gone through the most shit, and the guy and the one that guys are going to respect the hell out of. So I strongly feel like guys like Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims are already looking up to Tim Patrick as that veteran mentor. And when Cortland Sutton gets back, I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case for him. I feel like this stalemate is going to continue with Cortland Sutton until we get to mandatory minicamp June 11th through June 13th. Mm-hmm. If Cortland Sutton doesn't show up, then the Broncos can fine him. At this point, we're going to see how serious Cortland Sutton is about holding out. If he wants to hold out and get fined, then so be it, but it's going to be hurting his pocketbook in the short term. And at this point, it doesn't feel like Denver's going to extend him. So what does he want to risk is the question for Cortland Sutton.
So I do want to mention at this point, Mike had talked about Bo Nix, and I know it's a well-edited piece, or series. It's, I don't want to say puff piece, about Bo.
It's really
but
good,
that grit and glory path to the draft episode 2 just dropped, and Cam was nice enough to put it in our group chat. I am super excited about this guy. His work ethic, just, and again, I know it's like it's being how it's being put out there, but I can generally discern through some of the puff, and I think that this guy's going to be a very strong player for the Broncos, and our team is definitely going to be underestimated this year.
Yeah, it is a great piece. Bolt TV, I believe, is who did it. So go to their YouTube channel and watch episode 1 if you haven't already, and then episode 2 recently dropped, and then they're going to do a finale, of course, for episode 3. It is really good. And actually, there is I really wonder what was going through the draft experts and even the team's mind in this particular scenario. So this last year, in Bo Nix's last year, he played in the bowl game. I forget actually what the actual bowl game was. He played against UNC. Yes, UNC as in Drake May and UNC. And there was a point in that game near the very end where it was the game-winning drive, and I want to make sure I didn't mistake this, and actually I heard what I was hearing. It certainly seemed like Lanning put a lot of trust in Bo Nix in that particular situation and how calm he was, and it certainly seemed like to me, Glenn, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he actually called the game-winning play, meaning Nix called a game-winning play at the very end of the game to win it against UNC. So if I'm a team, this guy went toe-to-toe with Drake May and won the game and won the game over him, and also called the game-winning play at the very end to win the game. So like those types of things, I wonder why that ended up kind of getting swept under the rug a little bit, especially if those teams are doing right, especially if those teams are doing homework and talking to teams and talking to Dan Lanning and stuff like that. So how did that get swept under the rug? Because especially if I'm looking at a guy like Drake May, who went number 3 overall, versus a guy like, a Bo Nix, that actually would carry quite a bit of weight, right? Quite a bit of weight over a guy like, Drake May. So that was, I feel like, one of the biggest takeaways for me was that particular moment right there.
Another cool thing in episode 2 is being in the meeting room as they're scripting the plays for his pro day. And you have the receivers in there, and you have, just his coaches and his advisors and things like that. And they picked out 58 plays for, some on this side, some on this side. And it was interesting because like Bo was saying something along the lines of, like prior to his, he had everyone kind of huddled up before his pro day. And he was like, essentially it was going to be the last time they were going to be together. And Troy Franklin, I believe, was in that huddle. It was kind of cool. But it's definitely worthwhile. And each episode is somewhere in the neighborhood of like 20 to 25 minutes.
Yeah, or
it's
even
not,
30
it's,
minutes,
it's not a, it's not a real commitment. If you're a Bronco fan, you get kind of juiced about what we have to look forward to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously, we've had conversations about where we think Bo Nix is going to be with the Broncos, but I do think it's worth having the conversation going into OTAs, what we think Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham are going to look like, because we don't know for sure whether or not Bo Nix is going to start or not. But you have two guys that Capital was given up for that you would think they're going to put effort into, especially Zach Wilson. I mean, it seems like Denver is going to be the place where he tries to revive his career, right? So if we don't have Bo Nix as the starter, let's say he's not ready, I don't know. Who would you rather have as the starter, Stidham or Wilson?
I can't
Stidham.
answer that. That's the thing, is I can't answer that because and I'll just kind of just say it objectively. I can't answer that because I feel like preseason will be your determining factor of, possibly who's going to be your starter in general. I mean, and I say in general in the sense of what you're talking about of like if it's Bo Nix, I think. Let me just pose the case for Zach Wilson just a little bit. Obviously, I feel like, and I've been on record before, I feel like the room is probably going to be Jarrett Stidham and Bo Nix, and then they probably will move on from Zach Wilson. I've been on record saying that. That's obviously subject to change. But I will, pump the drum a little bit for Zach Wilson here. When Aaron Rodgers went down for his injury, Zach Wilson actually was a large proponent of why they were winning games when Rodgers went down. And one of the things that made it so well for him was playing within the system and understanding the system that, was given to him in the sense of don't, limit the mistakes, don't turn the football over, and, play some smart football. He was doing that for nearly 6 to 7 games. And had a really good game with the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, he was playing really smart football, for the Jets, and then unfortunately the wheels fell off, right? So I think that you cannot rule out a guy like Zach Wilson here. And of course, with it being a top 5 draft pick, you can't rule it out in the sense that, him possibly even being a starter. So if he comes in and he comes with the mindset that you would expect, which is this is a fresh slate for him to even develop into, I wouldn't even be surprised if he actually came in and he played at a much higher, clip than what he was with the Jets, because just come out and say it. He's in a much better organization than the New York Jets. Like, he's in a much better organization than them. And if you actually get a chance, I guess his mom replies to everybody, on Instagram. And I guess like in conversations that have, in talking to some of the people, it sounds like his mom and the entire family is super happy, and Zach is happy about actually leaving the Jets organization and just being really excited. It seems like be really closer at home as well. So this is an opportunity for him. This is a big opportunity for Wilson. And yeah, I would not be the least bit surprised if he's starting. And then it was actually Jarrett Stidham was the one who was actually cut, and they actually roll with Wilson for at least a period, and then they give it to Nix.
Zach's mom is excited to meet some new friends in Denver, so that she's got that going for her.
That's right.
True.
But Gage, you said Stidham immediately.
I did.
Expound on that.
I think that Zach Wilson was very much pigeonholed in that New York Jets offense last year, in where it was basically a first read and take a sack or run situation. Don't put the ball in harm's way. And that worked for about 4 or 5 weeks, and then it completely unraveled. Zach Wilson has a lot of stuff he has to improve on just from an operational perspective, and Bo Nix is already ahead of him in this area. Cadence, huddles, getting the play call out, identifying Mike linebackers, setting protections, pre and post snap coverage identification. All of that stuff, Bo Nix and Jarrett Stidham are both ahead of Zach Wilson in. Wilson needs to take this year and sit. he needs to sit, much like he should have sat last year. That was the plan. The plan was him to not see the field whatsoever and learn and absorb all of that from the sideline. I think that's what Sean Payton wants. I think that Jarrett Stidham is going to be able to execute his offense at a competent enough level to at least win some games out the gate if Bo Nix isn't ready to go. But I'm going to continue to hammer this. Bo is ready.
Mm-hmm.
He is ready. We can sit here and have this conversation about Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham. I think it's a healthy conversation to have. But I think when we look 2 months down the line, Bo will be the starting quarterback week 1, and Bo will most likely be getting those week 1, those first team reps by the time we get to training camp. I'm very confident in that based on what I've heard on how Bo looks. He's operating at the line of scrimmage like a veteran quarterback, and that's the first step. I'd rather him go out and make those mistakes early on. Some quarterbacks who aren't ready to play week 1 of their rookie season can't handle the pre-snap operational stuff. That's why they're usually not playing. You can live with the rookie mistakes. You can live with him throwing an interception as long as he learns from that interception. And Bo Nix is a guy who very clearly has the intestinal fortitude to not let a single turnover rattle him. It's the classic saying, FICO, fuck it, carry on. And that's what you have to do when you have a bad play. You've got to learn from it, and you've got to move on.
So that's what my FICO score means?
Oh, that makes so much more sense.
I would go, Wilson is interesting because he was drafted number 2. He was drafted number 2 by the Jets. They thought for a reason, and he's had terrible coaching in his entire career. And like Gage referenced, if you watched Hard Knocks, he was very comfortable learning under Aaron Rodgers and kind of being under his wing. Rodgers had taken him under his wing. And then 4 plays into the season, that whole plan changes. I actually think Stidham is starting out as the second string, mainly because he's had a year in the Payton system. He started 2 games under Sean Payton in the system last year. And so I think he has the edge with that. You put the wrinkle in that the Broncos really, it was a no-risk trade for Wilson. It was a pick swap. And, his rookie contract actually expires after the season. So if they retain him next year, they'll probably pay him less next year than he was going to be making this year as the number 2 pick in his 4th season. So it's very interesting, but I do think that, there's no doubt about it that Bo Nix is going to start there week 1. And I think the fans are going to have some patience with him, and maybe they don't even need to have patience because the reports are that he's so strong out of the gate, and we're not even to training camp.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I think if you were to ask my personal preference of where I would want things to go, I want a 3 quarterback room. I actually want a 3 quarterback room in 2024 with Nick starting, and I want Zach Wilson to be here. And funny enough, I'm going to make the comparison, but I want Zach Wilson to be the Sam Darnold in Denver. Like I want him to just sit, enjoy his time, and really just soak up the fact with Sean Payton in this offense, because I think I think there's an avenue for this to be 3 quarterbacks in the sense and if there are, then frankly, that's actually, I would say it's smart on the Broncos part because you're going in with a little bit deeper of a quarterback room than previous years. And so the fact if something hits the fan, you at least have a couple guys you can go back on versus, having a 2 quarterback room. So I think that if you do roll with that, I think it's really smart for you. And especially too, if you're Zach Wilson and you're not playing, but you're soaking it all in, you will be in far better shape because of that next year. That if they decide to move on from Jarrett Stidham officially and not bring him back and sign him to a contract, then at that point you become that guy to really take place and replace Jarrett Stidham. And when you are, endeared by Sean Payton, that carries a lot of weight. And so, I think winning that locker room and in particularly winning Sean Payton, I think will help him long term of not just, where he's at in the NFL, but, with where he could be with, the Denver Broncos, because we know that backup quarterbacks are endeared by Broncos country, aka Gary Kubiak. So I think that, I'm not saying it could be that situation,
Brock
but
Osweiler.
yeah, Brock Osweiler for at least
Chad Kelly.
Yeah. Hydro vacuums. But
Kirby salesman.
Bubba Brister. But no, I just think that like it's really beneficial for them to carry three. And I think as far as, Bo Nix starting, I think it's interesting sometimes like when we look at prospects and we look at the traits and everything that they possess, I feel like, one of the things that will always carry over for you, and this is stuff that Gage talked about like a few minutes ago, but the pre-snap cadence and understanding like the protections and everything that is going to be happening pre-snap. If Bo Nix is doing that like right now, and he was already given the install, and seems like he's, at a really good place right now, who knows what it'll be like in week one. Right. And it's worth repeating and bringing this up. I just talked about Drake May and him actually, meaning Nix possibly, calling the play to end the game and beating UNC and beating Drake May at the end of the game. Right. Well, it's also worth bringing up the fact that Drake May has sucked in rookie minicamp and maybe at the beginning of OTAs. Right. It's worth bringing that up again. And so look, and obviously you're not going to sugarcoat it. You're not going to, come out and have it be, smelling like sunshine and rainbows, but like you also want to make sure you're calling it like you're seeing it. And we know that Sean Payton is the head coach that is going to, call it like he sees it, right? He's going to call it like he sees it. So the fact that Nix is where he's at now carries a lot of weight, I feel like, for Sean Payton, and especially with where Nix could possibly be in week one.
Yeah, and again, I think we all are under the assumption and of the same thought that Bo Nix is going to be the starter this year. I don't think there's much question about that. But I do feel like there's more excitement surrounding Zach Wilson than there is Jarrett Stidham just because of the potential. Like, you don't go number 2 overall in the draft for no reason, unless you're Ryan Leaf. But I'm just kidding.
Wow.
I mean, think about
Cross him off potential guests.
Now, I was going to say, so now I'll know why he unfollowed me on Twitter.
There you go. Just like remember the conversation we had last week about the Jets and Nathaniel Hackett, right? Like the report came out that they were trying to bring someone in to potentially be over Nathaniel Hackett to take over duties from him because they didn't trust that he was putting players in the right spot, calling the right plays, whatever it may be. Like they were counting on Aaron Rodgers to cover for Nathaniel Hackett, which is a situation that we found ourselves in before we brought in Russell Wilson. Mm-hmm. And you put Zach Wilson in that situation where he had terrible coaching before that. I think that they're having Sean Payton, having Davis Webb be able to let him learn and have a stable environment, stable team to do that with. I think there is every potential that Zach Wilson could end up being better than Jarrett Stidham. I think we've seen about the height of where Jarrett Stidham's going to play. I don't think we've seen the height of where Zach Wilson can play yet.
Like, is Nathaniel Hackett like Aaron Rodgers' ayahuasca dealer? Like, I'm just trying to figure out like what's happening here. Why he's so protected by A-Rod when it's clear that the guy is an absolute buffoon as an NFL coach. I mean, it's just when the Jets are trying to figure out how to do a runaround and get someone else to be the puppet master instead. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. I mean,
and it doesn't help when you have, let's just be honest, a slightly buffoon of a quarterback as well in Zach Wilson that you were dealing with last year. I'm going to play a little bit of Nathaniel Hackett defender because Zach Wilson did not do him any favors.
Wait, what? Can we, good thing this is we actually have a Nathaniel Hackett defender? Did I hear that right? Like,
Gage just charged up the mountain literally by himself. Like, wait, where is everybody?
I'm like Sean Payton, man. I call it like I said.
all of a sudden we're starting to hear crickets, in the background, and being the only one.
It's awfully lonely up here.
Like Gage in a gold suit, and that's it.
Yeah.
So speaking of bad coaches,
Hey, at least I got Aaron Rodgers with me.
oh yeah,
You can't see him; he's in the dark.
Woo!
oh boy. Yeah. Speaking of bad coaches, there were some things said by Dolphin safety Javon Holland about a coach that we have experience with, and Vic Fangio. And one of the reasons why I bring this up is because we keep talking about where Justin Simmons might end up, and people are getting all excited, like, "Oh, he's going to go back to Fangio." No, he's not.
No.
So Holland was asked about Anthony Weaver taking over defensive coordinator after Vic Fangio last year, and his response was a complete 180. He raved about how Weaver relates to players, asked what the difference is with Weaver, and Holland said it's the fact that he's a good person that makes a difference. So basically, he's saying that Vic Fangio is an asshole. Is basically what it is.
That's not news.
Vic Fangio is a great coach who is an asshole. I mean, if you didn't, the Teddy Bridgewater birthday wishes on the same day, it was Drew Lock's birthday. Like, it's Drew's birthday too. He goes, "Yep, it's Drew's birthday." It's like, guy's a prick.
Yeah,
and the calluses, like suggesting that you need more hits to get calloused, and the whole works. I mean, the guy makes a mean meatball. I saw him in the kitchen, but
old tricky. Vic.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. The Dolphins did whine a lot about him, and quite honestly, I think Philadelphia was lucky to get him based on what they had last year. They would not have had that collapse last year under Vic Fangio.
I will say this: Bradley Chubb in training camp last year was asked about Vic Fangio and was asked kind of what he brings to the table, and Chubb was kind of stoic in his response and was like, "I don't think I've seen him smile once since he's been here."
He's in Miami, like he's in South Beach, and he's not smiling.
Seriously.
and especially if you're looking at it from Justin Simmons' perspective, the reason why he would go to Philly is not because of Vic Fangio. It's because Christian Parker is the defensive backs coach in Philadelphia, not because of the fact that Fangio was there. And you touched on the calluses. Like he's look, okay. I hate to get all rub the feathers the wrong way on this, but I know that this has been talked a little bit about as far as Broncos' current head coach. People have mentioned Sean Payton as possibly being a dictator. Vic Fangio and his, prick mentality. You want to talk about a dictator? The way that he would orchestrate things and literally run you to the ground is literally a dictator mentality. Like, I don't care how you feel. I don't care that you have an injury. Like, I mean, Bryce Callahan was a great training camp player. And then he got hurt, right? And then he got hurt. And one of the reasons why is because he was running his players to the ground. And that is also, they even hate to say it too, that is also one of the reasons why the Broncos were one of the more injured and, injury-riddled teams under Vic Fangio because of the fact that he was running them to the ground. Now, Sean Payton is a very, gruff and, a tough, in terms of a coach, and he's got some of that style to him, but he's the best blend of, the Bill Parcells and the Vic Fangio-ish, type coaching that he'll be stern. He will definitely tell you like it is, but he will also be the coach that he needs to be to help you develop. And that's That's really important. Like, I mean, like, because a lot of people are really throwing out those ridiculous terms of Sean Payton's a dictator. Vic Fangio, the guy who literally came in here and did not wish Drew Lock a happy birthday and instead wished Teddy Bridgewater a happy birthday. Like,
Dictator off the end.
The same day. Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, like, it's
That's
just like,
the best. It was the same day.
so, I mean,
I have a little more insight too into why Fangio maybe have ran his course in Miami a little bit, and it's for this very reason. When they played the Baltimore Ravens last year, the Ravens absolutely shellacked them, especially the Ravens offense against Vic Fangio's defense. Fangio kept his players in there even when the game was already far gone. And what happened in the fourth quarter? Melvin Gordon, taking a handoff from Tyler Huntley, makes a move on Bradley Chubb, and Chubb's knee gives out, and he tears his ACL in a blowout loss where his players shouldn't have even been on the damn field.
This is with the Dolphins, mind you, by the way.
Yes, this is with the Dolphins. And that is literally one of the straws that broke the camel's back, according to Dolphins media that I've seen. Like that rubbed a lot of players the wrong way because Fangio refused to pull his starters in a blowout loss. Mike McDaniel thought about pulling off offensive starters. I believe they had pulled offensive starters, but Fangio didn't want to pull his defensive starters, and look what freaking happened. You lost your biggest vocal leader in the locker room in Bradley Chubb.
In Vic's defense, he did think Melvin Gordon would have fumbled the ball long before he got to Bradley Chubb. So let's be fair.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so Glenn's on that mountaintop. Gage is on the one with Hackett. Well,
This is not the Twin Peaks that we should be at, Gage.
No.
Nope.
All right, so not a whole lot else going on. I know we've got the renovation to Dove Valley. They're probably going to be adding stairs to those mountains for Glenn and Gage to continue to climb up and down on.
I'm hoping for an escalator. Quite honestly.
An escalator, that works. You got the renovations to Dove Valley, and it just came out that the Broncos are going to hold a joint practice with the Packers ahead of the second preseason game, and they will allow people to go to that joint practice at Dove Valley, even though they're doing the renovations.
Yeah, Gage, you heard that right before the show started, I think, right? So, like, what do you know about that?
Well, just what the Broncos had tweeted, and basically what Mike said, that they will be holding joint practices with the Packers and that they will indeed have fans there. I was concerned that because of the renovations at Dove Valley that there maybe would be a limit on fans this year at training camp. But it seems that this year it's going to be full go, possibly next year, because of just the overall landscape changes. They're literally going to be like digging fields out and moving crap around. Maybe next year there won't be fans allowed at Dove Valley. They might have to do a few practices out at the stadium or something like that. Or hey, maybe move it back up to Greeley. That would be fun.
Yeah.
But no, I think that Damani Leach said that there will always be fans that will be able to attend training camp. They're not going to do kind of what the Falcons have done this year and almost had to shut training camp out from fans except for like one or two practices. They will find a way to make sure that these practices are in front of fans, even if they have to do it up at the stadium.
I'd be very curious if we actually, regardless of, for this year, even next year, I would be curious if they do the ticketed system again, like and especially for next year. My guess is in terms of next year, if everything that you mentioned, like, and it actually comes to fruition, I think the ticketed system would be best suited for that because you're talking about a very limited amount of tickets, and so I would not be surprised about that. And actually, for the joint practices, I would love to find out when those joint practices are happening because we know that the Packers are a preseason opponent. So I would maybe venture to guess that maybe one of those joint practices, joint practice would actually be taking place during the week of probably when they're playing that preseason game with the Packers, which funny enough, I will actually be going to. But no, I'm excited. I think joint practices are a big thing, right? It's a big thing for the team. It's like a mini preseason for them. Like it allows the Broncos and allows the Packers to not hit their own guys for once. So it's a nice evaluation tool for teams.
The preseason game.
Go ahead, guy.
I was going to say the preseason game, I believe, is August 18th. So I would suspect that the practice would occur on the 17th.
Mm-hmm. Or 16th or whatever.
Or 16th, 17th, something along those lines.
Or the 19th is like a goodbye present. Like, we already had the game, but let's practice one more time and then bye.
No. See, what they do is when the Packers lose, they will do an Oklahoma drill where the losers have to sit there and basically take it from an offensive lineman, and it has to be the player of the Broncos choosing. So in essence, what is it? Andre Carlson. I'm sorry, but you'll probably be chosen for this Oklahoma drill, and then a guy like Malcolm Roach is going to be coming after you in this Oklahoma drill. So just forewarning you.
Or
so Cam, what would the Nebraska drill look like?
How about we have Brandon Perna and Tom Grothy?
Yeah,
have to be a part of the Oklahoma drill. Whichever losing team has to take it. Imagine Perna just getting folded up by freaking Malcolm Roach.
I say if we do that, we sign Kareem Jackson back just for the preseason.
Yes.
Right? And then it'd be Kareem Jackson and Brandon Perna.
That's right.
That would be some good content for Brandon's channel, though. Like, that would probably be a multi-million view video right there.
Yeah.
And the GoFundMe afterwards would be unbelievable.
Right? Yeah, help pay the medical bills.
Yeah.
So here's kind of an off-the-wall question, just because of the way we're kind of seeing things go this offseason, right? Like, Denver's completely redoing Dove Valley, adding fields, adding fan experience to all kinds of stuff. You just saw the new concept for the Bears' new stadium, and we just saw the new concept for the Jaguars' new stadium, and you got the Bills working with Buffalo trying to figure out if they can get a new stadium. With everything that's going on right now, are we starting to look more towards Denver getting a new stadium at some point in the near future?
I think we've had this conversation quite a few times. It's been a while. Me personally, I say no. I feel like, and then granted, it helps when you've got the net worth of the Walton Penner Group, but I feel like with the amount of renovations that they've already made to the stadium, I would like to see it stay there. I know from at least maybe from a traveler's perspective, it would be great to at least have it in DIA. You fly in, you see that beautiful new stadium. Let me tell you, from a local perspective, the traffic will be hell.
Oh, it would suck. Yeah. It would suck.
The traffic would absolutely suck. Now, could they renovate the stadium in any way? Maybe. Maybe do a little bit more of the exterior upgrades, for the stadium. That would be interesting. I feel like if they do get a new stadium, it really does, in some shape or form, have to be downtown, because with the way that the Broncos could possibly do this is that if they're able to get a new stadium, it has to be a fixture. It may be the fixture of downtown Denver. Look, the Rockies may suck, but Coors Field is probably the fixture of downtown Denver, and it will always attract so many fans, right? It will attract so many fans because the Rockies may suck, but it's a beautiful ballpark, and it is a beautiful, beautiful baseball ballpark. And so if the Broncos are able to incorporate that downtown, it's got to be something that is going to surpass the Rockies in a fixture that is going to be downtown. That's my opinion. Like, they've got to at least keep it downtown, and it's got to be the fixture of the skyline of Denver.
Agreed. So one of the reasons why I brought this up, and specifically the Bears, because when we were talking about it last offseason and during last season about moving the stadium, getting a new stadium, a lot of what we were hearing was, well, that's where Mile High Stadium was. We don't want to move it because that's where all the history's at. But if the Bears can move out of Soldier Field into a different stadium somewhere else, I don't see why it's not feasible that the Walton Penner Group would want to move it out of where it is now to somewhere where they have more room.
But the new Bears Stadium is still going to be in downtown Chicago.
Right.
That's the key.
I thought they were moving it to that horse track.
No, they changed it. They
changed it. They're going back to downtown Chicago now. And again, just like Cam said, from a local perspective, having a stadium in downtown Denver, where it currently is like the most perfect location. The public transit is fantastic. If they build a stadium out at DIA, they'd have to do a completely new light rail system out there.
Mm-hmm.
They'd have to do a bunch of new roads out there. It would be a pain in the ass. I understand wanting to put restaurants and shops and all that crap out there, but as a local, we don't go out there unless we're flying out of town.
That's right.
We don't. We go to, I know I personally go to downtown Denver a lot, and I mean a lot. And I always pass by Empower Field at Mile High. It's a staple of this city. And I think I'm one of the few that feels like the current stadium is still a top tier, pristine NFL facility. I granted haven't been to many of the new ones to compare it to, but I still feel like Mile High can be one of the top stadiums in the league. They've already put that massive new video board there, which as somebody who attends every home game is a massive upgrade. I appreciate that. They've done a lot of improvements in the concourses. They've made sure that the bathrooms, the maintenance in the bathrooms is uptight. So I actually think that our stadium is still competitive with the top tier facilities in the NFL. And I think that the location that it's at is just second to none. It's perfect.
One of the conversations I've had with Glenn is anytime we go to a game, I hate the walk up to the stadium. Like when you get off the light rail and you are walking to the stadium, it's like you're walking through a bum's butthole. Like it is awful.
That is pretty bad.
Horrible. So I don't have a problem with the stadium staying where it is, but there's got to be a way that they can purchase that property, purchase that land, fix it up, do something. Because honestly, it's like walking under overpasses with homeless people all around you, and they're like taking craps in the gutter while you're walking to the game. Like it's horrible.
And then you got to pass like an old rundown railroad track on the way there. I will say that walk from the light rail to the stadium is pretty bad, and they could do some work there to improve that.
Let's be honest. Mike's biggest complaint is that they don't allow the scooters to go
yes,
the entire way.
There's a big complaint. Well, like especially when you're leaving the game to walking back to the light rail, you're covering your butthole the whole time you're moving. You don't know who's coming up behind you. It's creepy.
Sounds more like a you problem, person.
It might be, but it's fine. It might be, but it's fine.
That's why I always
I'm just
stay
trying
my
not to miss
post-game show there because I can miss that crap.
Yeah.
Pun intended.
Or scooters. Yeah, pun intended.
But
absolute booty cheeks.
But you know, I don't know. Obviously it's not downtown. But looking at possibly other areas or a other area, you know, that maybe they could possibly do it. It's gonna sound really biased right now, but it's not downtown or anything. But you know, Castle Rock has some area.
I knew it was coming. I knew
some land
in Lincoln, Nebraska.
You know, well, Nebraska needs a pro team.
Omaha needs a team. It's fine.
But like there is at least land to work with, at least with Castle Rock, and of course it's 20 minutes away from, you know, their practice facilities, and so I'm maybe having something maybe in the Centennial area, at least maybe doing something maybe that is closer to their practice facility. I could see them maybe figuring out a way to maybe work that in, possibly, and doing something, you know, in the Centennial area like that. That at least would be a interesting investment, because at that point you would be talking about truly a fixture of Centennial and the fixture of Centennial at that point. So maybe doing it close to the practice field, I would at least understand from that aspect if they wanted to do a stadium down in, you know.
I live in Centennial, so I'd be okay with that.
Saves me from all the traffic.
That wouldn't be bad. All right. Anything else that we didn't talk about? Anything you want to bring up before we go?
I'm good, man.
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, then we want to thank everybody for joining us in the chat. It has been absolutely wonderful being able to chat with all of you guys about the Denver Broncos and what else, covering buttholes and whatever else is going on. I don't even know anymore. Make sure you check out every show that's on the network. We got shows Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Neighborhood on game days. Make sure you go check out mainly Broncos on Wednesday with Cameron Parker. You got Broncos Syndicate with Gage Madrid that is absolutely blowing up right now. So make sure you go over there, hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up on their videos, as well as on the network videos. We would greatly appreciate it. We love everybody. We love the Broncos. We'll see you guys later. Peace out.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast's racking up the flame out.